There are 3 places visitors to Singapore may inadvertently break the law, and I'm going to take you through them in this video. From chewing gum to blowing smoke, I want to help you avoid thousands of dollars in fines, avoid getting kicked out of the country, avoid spending time in jail, and even avoid getting smacked with a rattan cane. While I'm not here to give you legal advice or teach you how to get away with crimes in Singapore, I do want to share with you some of the ways I've seen tourists get in trouble here and how you can avoid some of the same mistakes. Most visitors I help have a very limited time in Singapore, and in a rush to make the most of this time, many rely on the affordable and efficient MRT system to get around. But what if one day you step onto the MRT and the doors refuse to close? You stand there as seconds turn into minutes and minutes turn into hours as hot and sweaty crowds build up around you, wondering why this train is not moving, stuck with its doors open. How frustrated would you feel when you asked an attendant about the reason for the delay and they reply with, "Someone stuck chewing gum in the doors and they cannot close." It was this feeling of train travelers' frustration by simple vandalism causing such a significant disruption that led to Singapore's infamous chewing gum ban. In the 1990s, when the MRT was still relatively young, some disruptive individuals thought it would be funny to stick chewing gum in the doors of the train. The doors were unable to close and subsequently the train was unable to move. This happened at least twice in 2 months and chewing gum was subsequently banned for sale across the island. Tourists getting fines or jail time for chewing gum, I feel, is an unfair misconception. There's no jail time or caning or anything like that for chewing gum, even if you inadvertently brought in a packet of gum in your luggage to Singapore. The law is a ban on the sale, import, and manufacture of chewing gum, so you really have to go out of your way as a visitor to break this law. Please don't think there's a black market here for chewing gum though and try to smuggle in packets of it for resale when you visit. No one here cares enough to buy under the table chewing gum. We use breath mints instead. I remember when I lived in the UK and caught the train, I would be surprised by the number of people enjoying a glass of wine or a case of beer as we made the hour-long journey to London. This wouldn't go down well at all if you tried it on a Singapore train. MRT trains and their stations in Singapore are kept immaculately clean, and preventing people from eating or drinking on the train is one step in achieving this. The only time I've ever seen anyone get in trouble for eating or drinking on the train was this woman who drank bubble tea. Many MRT stations are connected to shopping malls where bubble tea is a popular drink to buy, and this lady bought a drink and started drinking it on the train. Thankfully, the fellow travelers around her reminded her of the rules, and she wasn't fined in the end, but you could be fined up to $500 if you do break this law. Bringing food and drink on the train is okay though. It can be a good option for dinner to pick up takeaway food from a hawker stall or food court and bring it back to your hotel to eat. As long as you're not opening it to eat on the train, then there isn't a problem. The rule is against eating and drinking, not against carrying food on the train. Now imagine you're going to sit in and get something to eat at one of Singapore's affordable, outdoor, UNESCO cultural heritage hawker centres, and it's busy. You're hunting around for a table and all you can see are piles of mess. Used plates piled high, food trays scattered over tables, and an overworked cleaner in the corner trying to sort it all out. This does not make for an appetizing setting, and nor is it very efficient waiting for cleaners to get around to every table. Rather than employ more cleaners, an unpopular and underappreciated job, and consequently increase rents on stalls, which will have a run-on effect on diners, the Singapore government instead instituted a rule that patrons must clear trays and cutlery from their tables after they finish dining. Now there is a small fine attached to this rule. Table littering at hawker centres, coffee shops and food courts can attract a fine of $300. However, the enforcement agency does state that first-time offenders should receive a warning. Generally, I find in Singapore that everyone prefers an education-first approach to the rules, and they're more likely to teach visitors about the rule and why it's important than to outright fine you. For anyone visiting Singapore's hawker centres or food courts, I encourage them to follow this rule by firstly, returning trays, bowls, chopsticks, knives, forks, and any other cutlery to the tray return stands. And secondly, throwing out any rubbish that has accumulated on the table, such as plastic cups and used tissues. The government agency clarified that you do not need to wipe the table down. Tables will still be clean, but the rule is simply to help the cleaners by returning all cutlery and trays. Exploring the shops of Orchard Road is something I frequently recommend, but it was also the area where I saw a foreigner recently fined for breaking the law. Now, Orchard Road is a designated no smoking zone, meaning that there are only a few specific areas along Orchard Road you are allowed to smoke, but that's not what he was fined for. This visitor I saw had gone into one of the designated smoking areas, pulled out a vape and took a few puffs. A plainclothes officer approached him and said that what he was doing was illegal and he would have to pay a $2,000 fine. Using a vape is illegal in Singapore. Bringing a vape vape into the country is also illegal, and bringing in any component of a vape, including the juice, into Singapore is illegal. Speaking of Orchard Road, hotels all across Singapore are expensive, especially when compared to neighbouring countries. Now, if you go to Airbnb to look for a cheaper alternative, you'll notice something strange. There aren't many listings, and even those that are there are mostly for tiny hotels and shared dorms. This is because leasing out part or all of a residential unit for less than 3 months is illegal. Anyone listing a room or apartment on Airbnb for a period of less than 3 months should be a licensed provider, or else they're probably doing it illegally. Now, if you happen to book one of these, I don't think it's the tourist who gets fined, but it's the owner or leaseholder of the unit that the authorities go after. That said, do you really want to risk having your booked and paid for accommodation cancelled because the host broke the law? I recommend that tourists in general should avoid Airbnb for Singapore. The listings are mostly either illegal or low quality accommodation. I recommend booking directly with a licensed provider instead. Just off Orchard Road is Fort Canning Park, a lovely place to explore, especially if you're in Singapore for work. And at the top of the hill is the next opportunity to break the law. I can't even show you this because it would be illegal, so I'll point it out on Google Maps. There are a few places in Singapore where filming and taking photographs is illegal. Usually these are critical infrastructure or military related. I've never heard of tourists getting fined for this one, but I also wouldn't want to go and find out. Beg packing and unlicensed busking are also illegal in Singapore. The government goes to great lengths to ensure anyone who would be begging is either housed, if they're homeless, or prosecuted if they're faking it. Busking requires a license, which is not available for short-term visitors. Graffiti and vandalism are also famously illegal in Singapore and met with harsh punishment. The closest you'll find to graffiti in Singapore are commission pieces. Please don't come here expecting to tag a train. Protesting is also illegal. Singapore values its safety and harmony very highly, and anything that might disrupt this harmony is met with strong punishment. Even protests that aren't related to the government, such as if you don't like your football club's owner who happens to reside in Singapore, can result in jail and getting kicked out of the country. Interestingly, bringing Malaysian newspapers into Singapore is also illegal. This rule dates back to the 70s when Malaysia and Singapore agreed to not allow the other country's newspapers into their country to reduce the spread of inflammatory writing. Less relevant these days, especially as there is no restriction on the news websites of either country, but the law is still on the books. It's been a long time though since I've heard of a tourist getting in trouble for this one. For things you should be doing in Singapore instead of breaking the law, check out my video here next.